What is going on, all you awesome superhero aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast. I'm Nick with my co-host Jimmy, Ruben. We got a special guest today, my good friend Chris, aka Chris Focus. You can find him on IG. Very talented singer who's a big fan of superhero culture, and we are all things superhero talk, of course. Now, before we get started today, I just wanted to give a shout out to all you guys. There's a lot of craziness, a lot of messed up things going on in this world. So I'm just praying that we all find our solidarity, that we can all come together in times of crisis like this and be more forthcoming and be more compassionate and empathetic to what all things that people are going through. So praying for peace and praying for your solidarity and for us to unite as people. So with all that being said, let's get to know you a little bit more, Chris. What was your introduction to superhero culture, or what was it that fascinated you about it that said, hey, I'm into this, I'm a fan of this is cool?
Just growing up, just, watching cartoons in the mornings. It's just an escape for me, honestly, from every day. You could jump into the world of superheroes and just kind of get lost and have something to, look up to and relate to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Was there a show of yours that was your favorite?
I would, growing up, honestly, I was a big fan of Static Shock, honestly. Static Shock
Definitely.
Just an everyday kid.
We used to watch the Saturday morning cartoons.
Saturday morning cartoons, pretty much, yeah.
Is that still a thing?
I don't know.
Pretty sure it is.
The kids today don't definitely know anything about that. And when we grew up, that was a thing, and waking up early on Saturday mornings. I even think that people were more enthused more kids are enthused and excited to wake up for that than actually going to school during the week.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Toby. Shout out Toby. Shout out to Tom Holland. Obviously Andrew Garfield. They're doing an amazing job with Spider-Man. But Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. He's the one I could mostly relate to. Just an everyday kid going through his everyday struggles as a teen, falling in love and trying to balance all this. Balance the superhero role and love and school. I think he was the most relatable one for me. So,
you would say that was somebody you could relate to the most.
Yeah, I would say that's someone I would relate to the most.
Definitely.
Like I said, I'm a big Toby fan. So, like when I saw that movie as a younger cat, I was like, damn, that's my Spider-Man, and I've been loyal to him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for all of us too, because a bunch of kids really grew up with Spider-Man. I mean, I grew up on Spider-Man the animated series, and then obviously watching Tobey Maguire and the Sam Raimi trilogy, that was a huge thing. So I definitely feel like a lot of us kids definitely related to Spider-Man, and that was probably the jumping off point for our introduction to superhero culture, the thing that really made us gravitate towards that and say, hey, this is cool, and having those more deeper introspectives into the whole world of superheroes. So definitely something that I think all of us can relate to. So we really appreciate you being here, brother. We're glad you're here. You're an excellent addition. So let's get started with today's episode.
I'm a big fan of y'all. Keep pushing what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
I try to promote your page on my page as much as I can.
Yeah.
I'm about to share that soon. I just wanted to get it set up with the lighting and everything.
Yeah. Fun fact, he actually won the painting of the Gotham Rogues gallery over his left shoulder. He actually won that on a contest that we had. So awesome for him.
And it makes a lot of sense because we work at a casino, Nick and
exactly.
So it's
and fun fact about that too. So me and him got cool when we moved up here to San Jose, and the opportunity came up for us we were holed up in a hotel, and the opportunity came up for us to be roommates at the hotel. And I remember at that time, WandaVision was like in a couple episodes deep. It was like 3-4 episodes deep. And I didn't know he was a big fan of superheroes and all that. So he was just like, yo, bro, are we going to be watching WandaVision tonight? And I'm like, oh, well, we're kind of behind. It's like 3-4 a.m. We got like 3-4 episodes to catch on. Yeah, we could do it. And then obviously when Falcon and Winter Soldier came out, we went to go, and then the Justice League, when the Snyder Cut came out on HBO Max. So all of that was really cool because that was just something more that I could really bond with somebody over, and having that perfect roommate. So obviously all of that really made that transition a lot better for me, brother. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely, man. So all that being said, let's get started today. So First thing we got is casting news. White Lotus star Fred Hetchinger will play Spider-Man villain Chameleon in the Craven film. Could we be getting the Sinister Six sometime soon? Which Spider-Man do you think that they'd face off against?
I think if we got the Sinister Six at this point, especially if it's a Sony thing, it's going to be Andrew Garfield. The way that people are calling for Andrew Garfield to come back, the positive reception that he's seeing online, and the fact that Tom Holland is actually supportive of it and has talked about wanting to see an Amazing Spider-Man 3. And it's just, if Sony could cut Disney out of it somehow, they'll find a way. And that's their answer. That's their answer, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the Sinister Six are coming. They are already introduced 4 of them on the previous movie, but I don't think it's gonna be all of them in it. They still have a lot to work with, you know. So I don't know which Spider-Man, to be honest, because we did hear that Tobey Maguire wants to continue playing Spider-Man, and there's talks that he is gonna continue playing Spider-Man. I just don't know how big his role cannot be.
Yeah.
And for Andrew Garfield, yeah, like you say, he's getting a lot of love right now. A lot of love. And anything can happen. I don't think it'll be Tom Holland. And if it is, well, I'm all for it. You know, I just want something good, basically.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. I honestly, I'd be cool with any of those 3, honestly. But I think because of all the build up and the hype that's been happening in social media, they're probably pushing for Andrew Garfield the most out of those 3 guys. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a Toby cameo. Yeah. So yeah, I think they could do a lot with Andrew Garfield still. And I think that's the pick. I think he'll probably be the next one to come out in that one.
Definitely. Were you going to say something, Jimmy? My bad. What were you going to say?
I think that they're all going to continue playing Spider-Man in some sort. I think Tom Holland is still going to be doing the main ones for the MCU. Sony is going to try to get in by getting in on the Andrew Garfield love train, and then Tobey Maguire is probably still going to be popping up in multiverse mini roles. Like,
I feel he might come out in Doctor Strange too.
Yeah. I don't picture him coming back for a new Spider-Man movie, but I picture him popping in throughout the MCU and possibly Andrew Garfield. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him pop up in Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies at this point.
Yeah, and what we do know is obviously they try to do a Sinister Six back with the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Obviously, there was hinting at all that. We saw Rhino. Obviously, they had Electro in there. And then we saw the Doc Ock's tentacles. We saw Vulture's wings. So it seemed like they were really hinting at that. Obviously, all that got canned once that partnership with Marvel Studios came in, and now Spider-Man is going to be in the MCU. So obviously, they've been building up the Sinister Six for a long time. I think it's long overdue. We know Craven is obviously a big part of it with Chameleon coming in. There's other, and maybe Morbius also. We'll see what's going to happen with that. But there's got to be some kind of connection with that. I don't think that's just going to exist and not have any inclusion or anything with Morbius. I'm assuming that's all going to be connected in some way, shape, or form. And it just makes sense with Andrew being the one that's going to be facing off against the Sinister Six. I mean, it could be something to where it's something more multiverse. I think that could also work too. And that was also what they were hinting at with No Way Home. So my pick is Andrew, but it could also be Tom. Maybe they all come together to face off, but it would be cool to see, obviously, Spider-Man, his big thing is going up against the Sinister Six by himself and being outman, outgunned. So that would be really cool to see Andrew or Tom face off against them alone. I don't think it's going to be Toby for that same fact, him being a little bit older, although he did seem eager to come back in a capacity. I don't think he's going to be getting a star role. It would be cool to maybe see a Spider-Man 4 with Sam Raimi coming back. I don't know how likely that is. It seems like it's more likely Andrew is going to be getting more films in the future. So I think that's more than likely the case and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I would agree, honestly. Yeah. I mean, Andrew Garfield was done as Spider-Man, but then now he's included in this, multiverse, and he's back for. It seems like he's back for a while now. He's gonna stick around for sure now.
Yeah, just given how positive the fan reception was, and now everybody's hopping on that Garfield hype train. Oh, we always loved him. He was always a good Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and
remember
all
all
this
the hate
BS that people
Yeah,
had
like, the
about it,
movie
man.
was good, but he was a good Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, of course
Okay,
he was.
you know what? We actually talked about it before it was ever announced. If anybody ever tells me I jumped on a train, I said it on this podcast before they ever talked about bringing him back that he was my favorite Spider-Man. So I'm not jumping on a hype.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I always got laughed at, or like, oh, you like emo, you like cool, dark, trying to be Batman, Spider-Man over the OG Toby. And, and obviously, like, they had a lot of those references and a lot of those meta things going on in No Way Home, which is pretty cool to point and make fun of all that. But yeah, this is pretty exciting. We haven't seen Chameleon in a live-action depiction before, so he's one of those lesser-known villains that of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, who has been a popular mainstay and has been a large part of the mythos. So this is a cool time for this character to shine. Don't exactly know what his inclusion is going to be since this is supposed to be focused on Kraven, but it does sound cool, and I'm excited for it and excited to see the Sinister Six face off against Spider-Man sometime in the future. Moving on from that, we got some TMNT news. Obviously, this is why I'm wearing it. So we have a first look at the TMNT in the Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg produced animated film. Seems the animation is going for something different. Do you guys like the direction they're going? Does it look like it will do the TMNT justice?
I mean, it's definitely a modernized look. It's not how we're used to seeing them. That's hard to say. I mean, you can't really just base, it's hard to base something just on a few images. I think the faithfulness will come a little bit closer in the storyline and the characterization than it will in the animation style.
Definitely.
Yeah, the animation.
Yeah, I feel. Go for it, Chris.
The animation style looked a little goofy to me, but as long as it's the pizza and what makes it special, what makes TNT special, like obviously the turtles, and everything, the right color scheme. They don't try to change it too much. It should be good. It's hard to mess up. It's hard to mess up the TMNT turtles, honestly. But like James was saying, you can't really tell too much about just looking at the images.
Definitely.
Yeah, I feel like they're doing something different. Yeah, they're definitely doing something different with the look. With the art. I do like the artwork though. It does look goofy, but it's something different. Like I'm saying, but it intrigued me. So I'm like, all right, I'll see what's up with it. The artwork. If this is how the animation is gonna be, then I'm for it. I want to see what they're gonna do with it, how they're gonna work with it. And it's like you guys were saying, it all depends on the storyline, We love TMNT, you can't, like Chris said, you can't go wrong with the TMNT. And if you do, then you failed some way, somehow. But what I do got to say about the geekiness is, I guess, I'm not saying it looks more realistic, so kids can't compare this. You know how we're working out sometimes, we're superheroes. Sometimes they're all about muscularness. On this one, they don't. They just look like, regular turtles. They don't have to look all big. Yeah, teenage. Yeah, exactly. So then I feel like kids go relate with it a little bit more. Like, oh man, I don't have to always look big, or I don't have to always look muscular in order to be a hero or something like that. That's my take on it. But I am looking forward to it.
Yeah. I know for me, their design looks a little wonky. I'm not exactly on board with the style for the animation. But I think the thing saving it for me is that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, they seem to be very passionate people about the TMNT. Obviously, they were born in the early 80s, so they were kids when that late 80s series came out. And obviously, when the original TMNT movies came out in the early 90s, they were obviously big fans of that. So I think the thing with me that's saving it is the fact that they seem to be honing in on that teenage aspect about what it's like, because obviously too many, especially when you had like that rebooted live action Michael Bay produced TMNT movies where they look like freaking mini damn Hulks, like what the heck, indestructible, bulletproof. These are supposed to be teenagers. There's no way they don't sound like teenagers. These are freaking walking mini damn Hulks. Like, these are not teenagers. And so I feel like that aspect is saving it for me on judging it based off of just the first look that this is going to be bad. I would have liked to see them a little bit more muscular, a little bit more defined, a little bit. I'm not exactly on board with just the way they're portraying these turtles, but I'm also thinking that I think Seth Rogen, bringing that humor into it, knowing that they understand that whole teenage aspect on what makes the Turtles great, and focusing on that, focusing on them being kids and all that heart, all that compassion that kids display. I think that's something that's going to be very relevant and something that they're going to be really tapping into with this animated film. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this project, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, and moving on from that, speaking on from the TMNT, Paramount has revealed that there will be a TMNT reboot, not the Seth Rogen produced one. It will be followed. Obviously, that's something we talked about. The Cullen and Casey Jost, one of those guys is a SNL regular. They're going to be writing the script for this movie, for that reboot. And it's going to be followed by movies focusing on the franchise's villains. And this is going to be something that's going to be exclusive to the Paramount app.
Nice.
Where it seems kind of weird that as the only villain the general audience knows is Shredder. Obviously, there are other villains that they could do. They could do the Rat King. They could do the Umtrons. They can do Hun. They can do Bebop and Rocksteady. They can do Baxter Stockman. I would actually really like to see a Casey Jones spinoff. Casey Jones is a really interesting character who I feel can warrant his own kind of spinoff. But are movies possibly focused on other villains a good direction for this franchise when all the general public knows about is Shredder, who I think Shredder is an interesting character and really deserves to be the Turtles' best-known villain and their Joker to the TMNT. What do you guys think about all that?
I think this is their new way. Like you said, when it comes to TMNT, you can't go wrong. And it's like I said not too long, if you did something wrong. And I feel this is just them expanding, like you said. And you can't go wrong with that because like you said, the general public, all we know, majority is, Shredder, TMNT, whatever, he's the main villain. But if they really want to just expand in that universe, I'm all for it. It's cool because I'm pretty sure they will do a Casey Jones spinoff. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, they're gonna do a spinoff with that. Oh man, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Well, we'll go on. What do you think, Chris? We'll come back to you, Ruben.
Yeah, I think this whole expanding universe thing, I think it's a great idea. Honestly, it'll birth the new wave of like TMNT fans. Mm-hmm. You'll get all the casuals and you'll get some new ones too. And obviously, Paramount Plus they're trying to do their thing. They're trying to keep up with the other platforms that are already putting out original content. So they want to jump in and capitalize on the Turtles, who are already a popular franchise. So I think good for them, good for Paramount Plus for doing that. Will it work? I think so, because it's kind of, it's kind of hard to mess up the Turtles. There's a lot of fans. So, they could do the Casey Jones spinoff. They could do more of that. They could introduce more villains.
It seems like they're going to be focusing on villains. They haven't revealed which ones. Obviously, there's a plethora of villains that they can choose from in the TMNT universe. Yeah. But it was just more like there's going to be films focusing on those villains. We don't exactly know who it's going to be.
I'm intrigued.
Definitely.
I'd watch it. So
definitely. Yeah. What do you think, Jimmy?
I mean, like you said, the other they're not the villains other side from Shredder are not very well known to the general public. So before they do this, they have to make sure that this is a good movie, and they have to like really establish this new version of TMNT and make it very popular before they can go forward with creating a whole universe around them. So I think it's a little early to say. I think we need to see how this new version turns out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
How about you, Nick?
I would really like to. I'm a big fan of Shredder. There's so much cool things going on about the Shredder, and watching the 1990 TMNT movie where it just portrays Shredder as this stoic badass who can kick the Turtles' ass at any point and any time. The whole introduction of like the Japanese culture, the foot. I love the Shredder. Shredder is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Now, there's also other villains that I would like to see. The Rat King is awesome. Like, there's a bunch of awesome TMNT villains. And now we live in an era of, as Chris was saying, expanded universes, where they see Disney Plus having all of this success with all of their Marvel shows. Obviously, HBO Max is starting to tap into that as well. So now we're going to start seeing so many other spin-offs and so many other connections to these universes that are going to evolve around just flowing that content and trying to just hope gold strikes for them. So I don't think it's a bad move. It's hard to just know what the market is. Obviously, we had like that TMNT series from 2012 on Nickelodeon that did really well, and a lot of people liked it. But is that going to be enough to warrant the need or the attraction that people want to see more? I think that it could be a new way of introducing a brand new audience. People didn't know anything about the TMNT. You know, those little kids like me when I was younger who their first introduction to TMNT was that 1990 movie. But I also had an elder brother who loved Donatello, loved that early cartoon series from the 80s of the TMNT. So I really think that this could be a way for them to really build that brand into something bigger and to really just dive into pop culture like it did in the 80s. So good move. We'll see what's going to happen. I still want them to produce high quality content and stories that are intriguing and stories that are engaging, and not just do something and hope that gold strikes just because we have this brand and we have this product, but actually having the need and the necessity to make something worthwhile, to make something good.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. And interesting news also. So for all of you Hellboy fans, there's been interesting development, and Ron Perlman, who played Hellboy in the Guillermo del Toro films in 2004 and Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, has said recently he isn't enthusiastic about making Hellboy 3, but says the fans deserve it, saying, "Am I eager to do Hellboy 3? No. I'm 71 effing years old. But we owe this to the fans, and we should give it to them because it would be an epic conclusion." So Guillermo del Toro, the director, if you're reading, I'm not done. Given how bad the reboot was in 2019, fans are probably more than willing to have Perlman come back despite his age. Could you guys see this coming to fruition and actually happen?
I can.
I'm seeing just a lot of unsureness and a lot of complicated.
The only unsureness is because of the age. You know, he is
exactly.
He won't be able to do a lot as he used to. You know, as far as action scenes. And if he is, it's just raising his gun and that's it. No fight scenes or anything like that. But it's like the way they did with Mark Hamill in Mandalorian.
There you go.
Younger version, you know, so they could work with it some way somehow. So I could see it happening in that form. But other than that, that's the only reason why I'm missing.
Okay, but in the Mandalorian, wasn't that part? I didn't see that, but wasn't that part CGI?
Yeah, they had a body double and they just CGI.
And that's what I'm trying to say. You know,
Hamill's face.
It basically is what I'm trying to say. They could make him look younger or something.
I mean, you could probably get a stunt double or something, but
Go for it.
Stunt double, CGI, and everything. But you know, we'll see if it happens. Right? He's really old now. He can't do some stunts. You know, he's gonna need that. He's gonna need some help for sure.
Yeah.
But were you a fan of the Hellboy series when that came out?
For me?
Yeah.
I think it was pretty badass, honestly. Like when the series or the movies?
The movies, yeah.
Oh, the movies, yeah. The movies were cool. They were pretty badass in my opinion. Liked where it was going and like the action scenes and everything. It was pretty dark too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dealing in paranormal and witches and demons and the son of the devil. So of course it's gonna warrant a darker storyline.
Yeah, and I mean I'm all for the whole darker storylines and everything and dark aspects of it. So I would have to rewatch them though. It's been a second since I've seen them, but I do recall enjoying the films though. Yeah.
Him always smoking that cigar. My bad. Him always.
No. What did you say? Well, I want to hear the cigar thing.
Oh, well, he's just always smoking that cigar. You know, that look is always so natural and fitting for him. It doesn't fail where he doesn't have a cigar in any movie or series that he's in. And then it reminds me of SOA a little bit, where he has that, like, you know, devilish aspect. Like he's
yeah. A lot of Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of Anarchy, yeah. So, I'm excited if he comes back.
You know, I know he's older, but Ron Perlman doesn't look frail to me.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't look frail at all. And if Michael Keaton can come back at age 70, he's going to be playing Batman in the bat suit.
And obviously that's a more physically demanding role for someone. But also, too, there's going to be stunt doubles for pretty much any action sequence.
I honestly, I don't think, I really can't see his age. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I've seen him in like other movies and stuff. He doesn't look frail, and he looks like he could still pull it off. I don't think, I mean, I don't think his age should be a problem, especially with you guys said with stunt doubles, with CGI and other things. He's not going to be doing the whole time is not going to be Ron Perlman performing stunts. That's not even what Hellboy is in the first place. So
I mean, even in those original movies, I would say he probably performed, 15, 20% of his own stunts?
Yeah, so, yeah, I could totally see him coming back.
I didn't even believe him riding the motorcycles in SOA sometimes, bro. I was like, this ain't him, dog. This isn't it. I knew I was younger back then, So I was like, this is not him, dog.
Those movies are really close to my heart, especially when we talk in this day and age about oversaturation of Marvel properties, DC properties. That's Dark Horse Comics, and especially because that was 2004. The fact that got a movie before the modern MCU Avengers, that's pretty cool. I got 2 movies, and the thing that was so great about those movies is they just had so much heart. I know I really wanted to do a deep dive and an exploration of those movies, or just a rewind into them, because they were so good. Those movies have so much heart. Guillermo del Toro understands that character. Ron Perlman nails that stoic, stern character, but also he has a lot of compassion for his teammates and those that are closest to him. And he has this deep relationship with his father, with Professor Broom. And I really like those. Those were stuff that were definitely missing from the 2019 version, aside from him being close to his father. You didn't exactly feel that same level of magic or that same level of heart that was in those first two Del Toro movies. So knowing that he had talking about coming back, and I know that they were trying to do a Hellboy 3 after the Golden Army, that never came about, and then they decided to reboot it with David Harbour, who actually did a decent job portraying this character, but it was just trying to be too grotesque and was just trying to be too visceral, and I think it went too hard with that R rating fiasco. And yeah, it was not good at all. God, it was so atrocious. But
I didn't even see that one.
So, and agreeing with Jimmy, I know that he is a little bit up there, but he doesn't look frail. He actually still looks like he's in pretty decent shape for a man his age. He still has an imposing figure, given the fact he's 6'2", probably a little over 200 pounds. And just given the fact that now we live in a day and age where Harrison Ford is going to be doing another Indiana Jones movie in his 80s. Well, I mean, he's in his late 70s when that happened. But
okay, all right, I'll say this: Ron Perlman coming back as Hellboy is more believable than Harrison Ford still doing Indiana Jones.
Exactly. Yeah, and we still have Tom Cruise performing a lot of his own stunts well into his late 50s, approaching 60 now. So I think somebody who is not frail, who's in pretty decent shape, who is just going to be doing the acting and not so much of the physically demanding roles or actions that this is going to require from him, I think that's very plausible. But I just don't think that there's a whole lot of intrigue or a whole lot of interest from fans. I think if this was probably sometime before that reboot, I think that reboot pretty much killed any hope that fans had for this future, even though Ron Perlman has gone on to say that he's more than willing and he's not eager, but he's more than willing to do it because the fans deserve it. I just think it's been too long. It's 2008 was when the Golden Army came out. Now we're in 2022, and this is not going to happen anytime within the next year, at least, before filming would start or for it to be greenlit. So we're looking at him approaching mid-70s before this even has a chance of getting off the ground. So I think if this doesn't happen within the next 3 or 4 years, I think by the time he's 74, 75, then it's just a done deal and it's just not going to happen.
I mean, if Ric Flair could do his own stunts and late into his 80s or something like that in the WWE, right?
He's not that old. Mid-70s, I think.
Mid-70s when Ric Flair was getting thrown off the top rope and everything?
Yeah. But I think the thing with me is there just has to be enough fan interest and there has to be a push for fans to get this made. I'm not saying that this can't happen. Obviously, that's the whole thing with Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds returning to this role and giving us an actual faithful adaptation of this character that we knew that he was more than capable of doing, but I just don't really see the interest and the intrigue from fans wanting it. I really want to see it, but I haven't even heard anybody talk about Hellboy in the longest time, and even fans that are people that are passionate fans of superhero culture as a whole.
Mhm.
So hope it gets made with
Yeah.
less to be seen. And lastly, we have, since the Batman is going to be coming out in just a week, we have some interesting development, or this is something that was reported a little while ago on what Matt Reeves said. So Matt Reeves is the director of the Batman, and he said this version of Bruce Wayne is inspired by Kurt Cobain. Quote, when I write, I listen to music. And as I was writing the first act, I put on Nirvana's Something in the Way. And that was the song that was used in that very first trailer that dropped at DC Fandom back in 2020. And he said that it's a song that promises a very different take on recent screen bats from Christian Bale to Ben Affleck, one inspired by, quote, a 90s grunge icon. That's when it came to me that rather than make Bruce Wayne the Playboy version we've seen before, there's another version who had gone through a great tragedy and became a recluse. So I started making the connection to Gus Van Sant's Last Days and the idea of this fictionalized version of Kurt Cobain being in this kind of decaying matter, end quote. Seems like an odd choice at first, but falls in line with Reeves' take on Bruce Wayne. Do you think we'll see him grow into the Playboy persona that we know and that is something that's been a defining trait of this character? Or will this inspiration of Kurt Cobain be a definitive trait for him going forward?
I mean, that's interesting because for one thing, him growing into the Playboy persona, the Playboy persona is a faked Playboy persona. It's not a real
it's
Playboy.
To deal with the hurt.
Yeah, that is just the Playboy thing that he puts on is for show. It's for the public. It's the idea that some rich jet-setting Playboy is not going to be out fighting criminals at night. And even in Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale's version, every time he did the Playboy thing, it looked forced or looked like he was just trying to get past it, just to like when he shows up in the helicopter with I think like the two Russian models and he makes his big scene. As soon as it's over, he's out on the balcony tossing his alcohol out, looking depressed. Even in Batman Year One, the comic books, when he puts on that show for Commissioner Gordon and his wife, where he makes it look like he's just been sleeping with some girl who doesn't even speak English the whole time. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so it's fake to begin with. So I don't know. I think it could work. I mean, Michael Keaton's version of Batman, I don't think didn't come across like he was trying to project a Playboy persona in it at all.
It was like an older version of Batman.
Yeah.
He just came off as very uncomfortable in his surroundings, as somebody who didn't fit in with that kind of world. Like somebody, you can tell he was somebody who went through a great tragedy, but I definitely see where you're coming from.
So I actually think that it kind of reminds, so I don't think it's completely unprecedented. Like we've never seen that before. I think like Michael Keaton's Batman is somewhat like that. So, I mean, it'll work. And just remember, the Playboy persona is not Bruce Wayne actually being a Playboy. It's just a front for the world.
Exactly. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I don't think, Bruce Wayne, I don't think he's trying to be like a Gatsby like character where it's like natural to him and everything, because it's not natural to him, the whole Playboy persona thing. He'd rather just stick to himself and kick ass, and he's driven on pain. He wants to be driven by pain, and it's it's hard to hide. Even if he fakes it, like you can still see it in his face. Like this is like what James was saying. It looks and feels forced to him. That's not who he is. He's not Gatsby. He's Bruce Wayne. He's driven by pain. He's,
exactly.
And it's hard for him to hide that.
Exactly.
So I think it'll work. Especially because they're going this whole dark route with it, and I'm all for it. Honestly, let's see what they could do with this, this vibe. Yeah.
What do you think, Ruby?
I definitely do like how he compared that whole Kirk, that whole, listening to music while creating. I mean, I feel like that's the more modern way of creating art. You want to listen to music while you're working on something. You just let your mind flow. And so I feel like as he was writing it, he literally was doing it. So that comparison is I like the comparison because, I mean, it's something that he was relating with when he was writing the story. That whole Playboy growing into that's where I'm like iffy about, where I'm like, okay, I don't know how he's gonna work with this, but I'm all for it because I'm all about I'm all about ideas and creativity. So I'm never gonna count anything out until I look into it or until I read it. And he has me intrigued already just by mentioning the whole comparison about music, you know.
I
So
mean,
I'm up for it.
I think it would be hard to turn him into a playboy after, because I don't know, like, I mean, within the world that this takes place in, are people going to buy that this recluse suddenly now is a jet-setting playboy after, like, being, like, hidden for so long? I don't know how they're going to put that on. But I guess the Kurt Cobain the comparison kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, that's a very odd choice, but when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because Kurt Cobain was a very famous and damaged person who was obviously going through a lot of inner turmoil and projected.
And what do they do when they're, you know, hiding their pain? They're out there partying, they're drinking, doing drugs, doing all, you know, people with all these different ways. They're hiding their pain. And whether it's a persona or not, they're literally in pain. You can't hide that, like Chris was saying.
Masking their pain, like a certain somebody we know.
Yeah, the self-destructive mindset is tough to hide, even in the party scene, you know? So I think that's where he was going with the whole Kurt Cobain comparison. Yeah. He's a self-destructive minded person who's just, you know, ticking time bomb waiting to blow up. But he's going to use that to his advantage.
That advantage.
Driven by that.
It's something that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me when I first thought about it. And I'm not really the biggest Nirvana fan. I didn't really gravitate towards grunge. I, you know, born in the 1991. I didn't really come up with listening to that. So that whole thing was not something I understood. But just knowing that Matt Reeves was obviously a big fan of Nirvana, we saw that in the first trailer. And now you're hearing about this, and then the whole way that they're portraying Bruce Wayne, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. And it's just a way for somebody who had gone through a great tragedy and was never able to get over it. I think that would affect them in great ways. And that would be something that, especially if they're young, you know, this version of Bruce Wayne is supposed to be young, supposed to be like 2 years into his career, and people are wondering if he's even real, or if he's just a myth, or what, or if he is even real. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense the way that they're portraying him being a recluse. The only thing I think it would be a little bit easy for someone to figure out his identity, just because, okay, Batman is this brutal character who obviously has access to money, who has a lot of time on his hands. Bruce Wayne is a recluse. We don't see a whole lot of why, you know, if he's being reclusive, what has he got to hide, or why is he being so reclusive? I think the only thing, I don't see him growing into like a playboy kind of role, especially with Jimmy had said it would be hard for him to go from being a recluse or being somebody who didn't care about his social status or his identity or all of his influence that he has and affluence as Bruce Wayne, to go from that to partying out with models, sleeping with models, acting drunk, acting a fool in Gotham. I don't know about that. I would hope maybe something to where he grows into a role like how he was portrayed in Batman the Animated Series, where he was a model citizen and he was doing everything he could to help Gotham, was a well-respected businessman, took an active interest as the head of Wayne Enterprises. I would see him more mature in that aspect, not like how how he was portrayed with Christian Bale, a drunken buffoon who just squanders his money and people are just like, oh, that's Bruce Wayne. All he does is party and waste his inheritance. I would like to see him at least transition into a more mature role and a more responsible role. And I think this movie is going to be about him discovering his humanity. Obviously, we know he's very angry, very brutal, and willing to go those kind of, I teeter along those lines of, is he going to kill somebody or not? And I think this movie is going to be about him discovering his humanity, where he's going from the Dark Knight to the Caped Crusader. Not saying that he's not the Dark Knight, but at least going from that vigilante to becoming that hero. And I think that's going to affect his humanity and affect him in a way to say, oh, I can help out, obviously, Gotham as Batman, but I can be doing more as Bruce Wayne in terms of philanthropy, in terms of giving back to the community, in terms of actually using this celebrity status that I have and this icon status I have to do something worthwhile in Gotham. So I think that's going to be the transition as far as the whole Playboy thing.
See, I can see him transitioning into like a philanthropist than a Playboy. That makes a little bit more sense. Also, the Kurt Cobain thing, I think, makes more sense for Batman than it does Bruce Wayne.
For Bruce Wayne,
But a lot of Nirvana's music is pretty angry, pissed off music. And in a way, the Kurt Cobain is projecting a persona. He's a rock star. And one of the things that I found interesting about Robert Pattinson, about what he said about his portrayal, is, and this is feeding off the anger, is the reason that he's so brutal in this, his mindset is that every criminal that he encounters is the one who shot his mom.
That's
So
the wrong way to
criminal he
yeah,
sees, that's what he thinks, you killed my mother. So that's why he looks so effing brutal in the trailers and everything.
Just the time bomb waiting. And I really get that sense in that first time we see him just go to town on a criminal where the guy's like, who the hell are you supposed to be? After he knocks him down, he just continues to fire like 4 more punches, and then that's just scaring the hell out of the other guys in this game. Like, you know, you can tell this version of Bruce Wayne is very angry and is just a time bomb waiting to go off and waiting to explode on whoever is in his way or whoever commits some kind of crime.
The one thing I want to touch on what you were saying, Nick, is what everything that you were saying reminded me of the Bruce Wayne in Gotham City, the young teenager Bruce Wayne, where I forget
in
the
show
actor,
Gotham, you mean, right?
Yeah, in the show Gotham. Yeah, in the show Gotham. Yeah, so everything you were saying that the reason why you can't see Bruce Wayne grow into that playboy, you know, persona, it reminded me of everything from the show Gotham, and I feel like it's a good touch on what you said. It's gonna be hard. Be hard to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm looking forward to most, is that this version is going to be transitioning from a vigilante to a hero, or the Dark Knight to the Caped Crusader. So I'm really excited, on board with it, and it's going to be really cool to see what they do with this version going forward. Robert Pattinson looks like a great Batman, already has a great Batman voice. Think this is going to be an awesome movie. I can't wait for it. 7 days, make sure you check it out. Well, probably a couple of days by the time this
comes out, it's going to be less than a week, so tickets.
And lastly, before we move on, there's actually some comic news that has been in some development recently. So Deathstroke returns to his villainous evil roots, ending his anti-hero status quo after seizing control of an iteration of the secret society of supervillains in Deathstroke Inc. And a preview for number 6 of the series shows him ordering the death of Black Canary. So in the comics, in live action depictions, he's been normally portrayed as a villain, more of a mercenary assassin for hire who comes into conflict with heroes. But in the comics, he's kind of tethered the line between anti-hero and villain. So it's cool to see him return to those villainous roots, because when he first started, obviously he was known as Deathstroke the Terminator because he was an assassin. And obviously this predated the Terminator movie. So when that came out, DC obviously dropped the whole Terminator movie to avoid any kind of conflict with James Cameron and that movie franchise. So moving on from that too, we have Marvel's new Ghostwriter series that dropped Wednesday, February 23rd. Radically changes Johnny Blaze and promise a back to the basics approach of Ghostwriter. In Benjamin Percy and Corey Smith's Ghostwriter #1, Johnny has, quote, the perfect life, a wife and 2 kids, a job at an auto repair shop, and a small town community that supports him. However, Johnny also sports a large scar on his head with something frightening and dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Notably, Percy himself told Comic Book Review that in this new series, Johnny Blaze no longer has control over the spirit of vengeance, and when possessed, he has no memory of what's transpired, further shaking things up. That sounds like it's going to be interesting. Lastly, this is actually pretty cool for all of you What If fans. Captain Carter will be getting her own 5-issue limited series that releases its first edition on March 9th. Written by Jamie McKelvey with artwork by Marika Cresta, Captain Carter has been summarized as an adventure that will find Peggy Carter as a woman out of time, facing the reappearance of an old foe in modern day and deciding what she stands for as a wielder of the shield. So pretty cool, interesting news in development for the comic book world. Make sure you guys check out your comics. Always go to your local comic book store, buy your favorite characters, buy your favorite stories, because that's obviously giving credence and really paying homage to the source material that is responsible for the superhero boom that we have in media nowadays. So make sure you guys are giving your appreciation to all that and all the artists and all the creative minds that are behind your favorite characters, because that's going to go a long way, and it shows that we're being appreciative of that. So all that being said, something I've been wanting to have a topic and a discussion on for a while, and this is something that you hear so much with fans, people that have been long-term fans of characters, and that is the whole legitimacy of comic book representation in media and pop culture being, quote, comic accurate. Is it the deciding factor when determining if superhero adapted media is good or bad? How often do you look at it and think to yourself if something is comic accurate? Do you believe it's important when comic characters and their stories are adapted? Let's start with Jimmy first.
I mean, that's a tricky one. I mean, all right. So one thing that I consider comic books, or what I find interesting about them, is like thousands of years ago, we had mythology, which is like the Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades. That's kind of like the mythology that we created for ourselves. I feel like modern American mythology is basically comic books and superheroes. And the thing about mythology and myths and stuff like that and legends is that they change a lot over time depending on the era that they're in and depending on who's telling the story. However, with that being said, there has to be a few core things that remain true to the essence of the character. So I think it's okay to change things up a little bit. I think it's okay when you're, obviously, because live action films and cartoons are a much different thing than comic books are. I think cartoons come a lot closer to comic books. It's easier to be a lot more comic book accurate. But things that work on the page don't always look the same or work out the same in live action, depending on how you're directing it and what kind of universe it is. I mean, if you think about the different versions of Batman, I mean, a lot of, like, Christopher Nolan has an excellent version of Batman, and I think it's a valid interpretation. However, that version, you wouldn't see Mr. Freeze in there. That wouldn't work out. Or Poison Ivy. Does that make it not accurate? I don't think so. So it just depends on how you're telling it, the vision you have, how it's being directed. I think a few things do have to remain faithful. You can't just turn it into something it's not, where it becomes unrecognizable. That becomes a big problem. But I think it's okay to change things as long as a few of the core things remain the same. However, the worst thing in the world is when something is bad and it's comic book inaccurate. That's when it becomes almost inexcusable, when you have a bad movie and they couldn't even get the comic book character right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris? What do you think, man?
I agree. You have to keep the core values. You have to not switch it up to the point where it's unrecognizable, like what James was saying. You know, and like you said, like the worst thing is, like, if it's not even accurate and it's a bad, crappy movie. But you know, as times evolve, you know, you could add in other things to, you know, add a new vision to it, add a new look to it, and kind of mold it to the times, you know, to freshen it up a bit and bring some new air into it. But you can't stray too much away from, like, what is true to the character, because then you'll confuse a bunch of fans. You'll lose some fans, or not lose fans, but you'll lose their respect as a director or as a, you know, creative-minded person who's trying to make something new out of something that's already there.
Definitely.
So I think, you know, if you want to keep fans intrigued and keep their respect, you know, you can't be adding too much to it to the point where it kind of, you know, loses its focus and loses what the true vision of the character or franchise is, you know. So yeah, that's my take on that.
What about you, Ruby?
Yeah, for me, it's like I've always said, you know, from previous episodes, you know, when a new movie or new series comes out, it's like I want it to, you know, be as close as the comic story as possible. Because I'm all for creativity, you know, you don't want the same old boring thing over and over and over again. But as long as it touches, especially with like you guys were saying, you gotta go with the times, you know, catch up with the time. So for costumes, obviously you're not gonna see someone just in undies. That's why I want to wait. What they're gonna do with Submariner? I gotta hold on back on that thought right now, because
he's probably gonna be naked. We all know that. I mean, that's what we all want to see, obviously.
I mean, no, but Ruben actually makes a good point right now. You were talking about the costuming and, like, underwear. I mean, a good example I could think about this is the original X-Men movies. There was some controversy at the time that they didn't look like their comic book counterparts, But they even make a reference to it in the original X-Men when I forgot who it was. I think it was Wolverine.
Cyclops and Wolverine.
Scott.
He says something about these are a little tight.
Figures.
He says they're a little tight or they're a little something. He's like, well, what would you prefer, yellow spandex? And obviously that was a nod to his comic book costume.
Yeah, it's the yellow
costume.
spandex. And the thing is, in live action, all of those characters in yellow spandex might not look cool. It looks cool drawn on the page, like as a cartoon, it looks cool, and drawing it looks cool. But like the yellow spandex or yellow leather in live action might not work. So I understand that when you're adapting to a different art form, a different medium, you have to change things a little bit to make it fit. But I think it works because, I mean, the X-Men movies are all over the place, but the best X-Men movies get the core of the characters right and get the mythology right, and so it's okay.
That's what matters to me.
Yeah, that's what matters. It's okay.
Exactly. So that's why I say where it comes to correlating with the comics, I just wanted to feel like I'm reading the comic, but in live action. So
yeah,
obviously it's not always gonna be the same because you don't want it to be the same. Because then it's just like, well, you just copied the comic book. We don't want that either.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like you gotta be creative, but you gotta, keep it. How do you say? How are we saying it right now? We gotta keep it, loyal to the comics.
Yeah.
It's always cool when creators and those that are doing some kind of adapted media with comic book characters and those stories. It's always cool when they are thinking of the stories and thinking of ways that they can adapt certain storylines, maybe dialogue, stories. That's always cool. But at the heart of it too is you don't just want to be reciting or hearing the exact same story that you know about. You would like to, as creators, they should be allowed to take some kind of creative liberty with what they're creating. The only thing is, as long as it's not a bastardization or something that is just completely inconceivable or completely unrelated to characters. But the hard thing is when you have a character like Batman who has 80 plus years of mythology, well, what exactly is comic accurate? What would you say is loyal to the character? When you have so many different storylines, so many different iterations, and when he first started off, he carried a gun. He hung people from the Black Plane. He was willing to kill, obviously. And transition to now, Danny O'Neill and Frank Miller, obviously they brought more of those darker roots to that character from where he was before. But then you had Adam West in the 60s that was also very reminiscent of the time because the Silver Age of Comics was a more toned down version. You had the Joker as more harmless prankster. So I think with me, it's that you have to understand that character. Someone like Matt Reeves, it seems like he understands this character. He's using grunge music. He's using Kurt Cobain as an influence, but it still feels very faithful, very loyal to the character of Bruce Wayne and to his persona. So I think the thing with me too is what I realized this is John Cena actually said in an interview recently that when he first was portraying Peacemaker, he was looking at the comic books, he was looking at all these sources of inspiration to help him in his portrayal of Peacemaker. And, he was looking at real life inspirations also. He's looking at Douglas MacArthur, R. Lee Ermey, who played the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket. And he was just going off, cussing everybody out, and, saying the F word every 10 seconds. And James Gunn just gave him some direction. He had said, douchey Captain America. Read the script. Don't worry about the comic books. There's so many different iterations, so many different portrayals, so many different writers who have different thinking or different ways of portraying a certain character. Douchey Captain America, read the script. That's all you need. And after that is when he was like, okay, I was done. I had a little bit of direction, and that really helped me turn this character into my own, or helped me understand this character more as opposed to looking at all. And I think that's the thing too, is when you read the comics and say a character like, Doctor Strange, the Punisher, Daredevil, characters who have so much history, so much mythology, so many different stories, when you go, oh, I'm going to read the comics for inspiration as an actor or as somebody who's a fan, or you're trying to create a story as a writer. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, which comics? When he first started, he was more of a swashbuckler who wore red and yellow. Are you talking about Frank Miller's depiction where he was more of a martial artist who honed in on that whole radar sense and honed in on more of those martial arts aspects and introduced the hand and more of those and a darker portrayal of this character? So think the thing with me is that you just have to understand, it has to fit the story you're telling first and foremost. And it has to be accurate in the sense that it still is relatable to the character, or it's something that is loyal to this character. That you're paying homage, but you're in a way making them your own, and that you're at least paying dividends, paying credits, paying respect to that character. You're paying respect to people, artists, and creators and what they created, but also in a way to make it your own. I understand that aspect, that as long as you're not doing something to where Catwoman with Halle Berry, as long as you're not doing something like that, as long as you're not doing something like that, that's a complete bastardization, something that, like I had said, of the character. It does not represent anything that character. We don't have any insight into who that character is. There's no way for fans to want to read up on that, to check out that character. Oh, this is my first look at Catwoman. I'm gonna go look at the comic books. I'm gonna go look at her relationship with Batman. I'm gonna go look at what kind of character, at what kind of stories that she is in, because I'm into this character. Obviously, none of that happened with this movie. So as long as you're not doing something like that.
Okay, that's probably the worst example of it. Is that version of Catwoman. I mean, this is the best way to put it. You can make changes and everything. Like, if you compare Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman to Halle Berry's Catwoman, there's a lot of changes made to Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. She's not really exactly like the comic books. It's quite different. But there's something about it that feels faithful to the core of the character and her relationship with Batman, that it still feels valid. As much as they changed it, it's still a very good version of Catwoman. Whereas Halle Berry's, they just completely tossed everything out. It's not even Selena Kyle. It's a different character named Patience Phillips. That's when you're going I understand. So you could switch it and make it your own, the way that Michelle Pfeiffer and Tim Burton did, and that worked for Catwoman. But the Catwoman movie, that takes it so far that it's not even recognizable anymore as what it was originally supposed to be.
And you said something very interesting too, Jimmy, with further talking about that whole Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman. Even though it's not comic accurate in terms of her background, her origins, obviously with her being brought back to life by cats licking her after being pushed to her death. But the way she portrays that character, the core aspects, her relationship with Batman, that's actually incredibly faithful to the character Catwoman. Even more so than Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises, who is somebody that is very comic accurate to her background, her origins, where she's actually a cat burglar, but it still feels like there's something missing. I would still say that Michelle Pfeiffer's version of Catwoman is more faithful to the character of Catwoman as a whole than Anne Hathaway's was, even though her background, her origins lines up with more of the character. That's something that is very telling, and something I think is so true.
Yeah.
And let's not forget how badly they messed up on the reboot of Fantastic Four.
Oh God.
Man.
Oh yeah, I know. That's
Horrible.
one of the worst ones too.
Yeah.
The first series of the Fantastic Four, obviously had a better cast. It didn't fulfill everything, but it was a hell of a lot better than the reboot that they came out with.
Yeah.
So let's see if we even get another Fantastic Four. I'm open.
John Watts is John Watts, the director of the Spider-Man, the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. He's going to be directing that too.
Nice. There you go.
I can't wait for Doctor Doom.
I actually think that as far as comic book adaptions, the MCU universe as a whole, probably the one that is the most faithful to their comic book sources. I mean, there's Spider-Man movies took a while for Spider-Man to become the Spider-Man of the comic books, but if you discount that, most of the universe seems to be a lot more faithful to the comic books. And not only that, it seems to work because it satisfies fans, and it has even people watching who didn't read the comic books and who wouldn't know the difference if this was faithful or not. So apparently being faithful does help to a certain extent, because that's what made the characters popular in the first place. And I think it's translating well with how Marvel's handling it, because the general public who didn't read comic books seems to be responding very well to these very comic book accurate versions of the characters.
The one I do gotta argue on is Civil War. Civil War is the one where I kind of felt broke away from the comics. They broke away from the original comics because we already knew it was going to be Iron Man versus Captain America. You know, they were going to be the main focal point where they were going to clash on something. But if I'm not mistaken, in the original comics, I think it was Captain America that was trying to do the right thing, and Iron Man was trying to do the opposite. You know, or so.
Yeah, Iron Man was kind of portrayed more as that villain because he was okay with all. Well, even in general, between what the whole. Because the whole thing was about them agreeing to the Sokovia Accords, but obviously in the Civil War comic, it was the Superhuman Registration Act, and that was more about heroes who needing to reveal their identities in order to be going on with their superheroics and being a career as a crime fighter. And now, but obviously with the whole, because there was no civilian identities in the MCU. In MCU, that was more about like accountability in terms of as opposed to having to reveal your identity.
That's very true. That's true. And then I don't know if y'all heard just mini spec real quick since talking about Civil War. The new Hulk films or series is supposed to be based off of Civil War 2.
Interesting.
And where supposedly Hulk becomes the immortal Hulk. But yeah,
but that'd be cool.
For another day. Yeah,
cool.
But so, what do you guys think though? Can if something is comic accurate, can it be good and can it be bad?
Of course, I think you could be a totally comic book accurate thing and still make a bad movie. You could be comic book accurate and still make a bad cartoon or a bad show. So I mean, to meet that mix, there has to be faithful to an extent.
Creativity.
And change it where you need to change it to make it work in the version of the story that you're trying to tell. So, a comic book accurate thing can be very bad.
Yeah, you need to adapt the comic book accuracy with the vision in place and that good mix of both. And if you don't have that good mix of both, then honestly, the product won't the finished product won't be as satisfying. Yeah, right.
But I do think like with comic book media, there is more of a leeway and there's not as much fan crying or fans getting upset with those changes taking place as opposed to something like adapting anime or adapting shows to live action, something like Avatar or just anime in general. I feel like more fans are going to be more on top of those companies to be as faithful as possible. And I don't really think they allow for any kind of creative liberties or as much. I feel like with this, there's a lot of creative control in the terms of the writers and the directors.
I mean, you guys liked all Peacemaker, right?
Yeah, loved it.
Oh yeah. So I mean, that changes a lot of things. That's something that I can give an example that I feel like. I mean, I feel like James Gunn is playing very loose with a lot of the characters in the mythology, but it works.
Yeah, and you're incorporating them to fit his vision. Obviously, one of the biggest things was Vigilante, as Eric had said, that he was a judge who went kind of crazy, became a vigilante, and then over time started brutalizing and going and becoming more of a darker character. Obviously, doesn't exactly fit from a comic accurate perspective, but it fits within the world that they're telling with the whole story and what they're doing. I think with things like that is when you can have your creative liberties as long as it has some kind of relevance or it has some kind of introspective analysis on that character, that you're at least paying homage to it and honoring that character in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely.
Keeping keeping his core values, his principles, his powers, what he stands for, and then just adding your own take to it.
Yeah.
And as long as it works, as long as it fits in your world that you're trying to create, then then it should fit.
Yeah. Or even like with John Cena, he had said he had tried to look at for inspiration, but James Gunn had just said, "Douchey Captain America, read the script." Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah.
But so all that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Real huge shout out to our friend Chris for joining us and hopping on today.
Right.
Thank you.
Make
guys
sure you follow him at Chris Focus on IG. Very talented singer. has some awesome stuff out there. Make sure you follow us on IG at Heroes and Mutants Podcast. Make sure you're hitting like, subscribe, share with your friends. We will see you next time. Take it easy. Cowabunga.
Cowabunga.
You guys.
Cowabunga.
Thanks for letting me join you guys.
Ungala for you.
Hey,
TNT
for
fans.
sure, bro. We appreciate you.